Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be reviewing functions and interactions of organelles. In the previous videos, we've looked at characteristics of life and we've looked at organic molecules. Now we're going to go inside the cell or look at the cells themselves, and we're going to look at functions and interactions of organelles. In your packet, if you can flip through and find this page, it says 1C functions and interactions of organelles. You can follow along with the video because I'm going to be going directly through it. So what are organelles? Organelles are structures inside of the cell. They act like basically organs inside of the cell. Each organelle has its own different specific function. All right, kind of like the organs in your body have their own specific functions. Each organelle in the cell has its own specific function. Now, although some cells contain a different assortment of organelles, what we're going to review, what we're going to look at is the most commonly found ones in eukaryotic cells. We're going to start with the centrosome. Now, the centrosome is an organelle near the cell nucleus that helps organize the microtubules in the cell cytoplasm. The centrosome is made up of two cylindrical organelles called centrioles surrounded by proteins. And I know it's difficult to see in the video. I put a picture of kind of what they look like here. I'm going to do this for each organelle that we go over. The next organelle is the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is really easy for everybody to remember. It's the clear gelatinous material found inside cells that supports and holds the cellular organelles. It's also the site of many cellular processes and contains a cytoskeleton which helps maintain the cell's shape. So if we look at this picture at the bottom here, this entire pink area inside the cell is the cytoplasm. The next one is the cytoskeleton. It's a cellular scaffolding. It is made up of microfilaments and microtubules. The cytoskeleton of a cell helps the cell maintain its shape. It protects the cell, it enables the cell to move, and it plays an important role in both intracellular transport, or transport within the cell, and cellular division. It's really difficult to see on the video because it's blurry, but it kind of looks like scaffolding or things that hold the cell, the organelles in place, right? It gives the cell its shape. The cell membrane. The cell membrane is what we call a selectively permeable lipid bilayer that acts as a boundary layer around the cytoplasm. It separates the cell from the outside environment. And this picture up here at the top, you can see there's a layer up here of lipids, and there's also a layer at the bottom of lipids. All right, so it's a lipid bilayer. Selectively permeable means that it's going to allow some things to go through and other things to not go through. So in addition to being able to recognize chemical signals, the cell membrane is selectively permeable to chemicals and controls which molecules enter and leave the cell. Cell membrane is extremely important, all right, and in the life cycle of the cell. The cell wall is a secretion of the cell membrane. Now, these are found mostly in plant cells, fungi, bacteria, many protists. All right, your cells, animal cells, do not have a cell wall. But the cell wall provides protection from physical injury and provides structural support. So in this picture, the cell wall will be this entire green outline of this plant cell. The chloroplast, it is the food producer in a plant cell. During photosynthesis, chloroplasts absorb light energy from the sun, and they produce food in the form of glucose sugar by using carbon dioxide and water. If you've seen pictures of plant cells drawn, they're normally larger ovals and they're green. They look like this over here. you can see, and there's different internal structures of chloroplasts, which we'll look at later when you look at photosynthesis more in depth. Chromatin. Now, chromatin is a collection of DNA and proteins that contains the hereditary information of an organism. It's the DNA. So if you look at this picture up here, the chromatin is kind of looks like a bowl of noodles here. This is the chromatin. Now, it's loosely packed until the cell gets ready to divide, all right? And then it condenses and forms chromosomes. So the chromatin is loosely packed during interphase, which is most of the cell cycle, to allow for easy access for gene expression. All right? It allows for proteins to be made. But prior to cell division, the chromatin condenses and forms chromosomes. Now, the endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER, it's kind of like the highway or the transportation system in the cell. It transports proteins within the cell. It's also the location of lipid synthesis on the smooth side, or on the smooth ER, and it is the location of protein synthesis on the rough ER, because the rough ER has ribosomes on it. The Golgi apparatus is an organelle that processes and transports waste and other materials out of the cell by a process called exocytosis. Now, in addition to playing an important role in waste disposal, the Golgi apparatus also processes, sorts, and modifies proteins in a cell. A lot of times I've seen this called, this organelle, students have described it, and even textbooks have described it like a stack of pancakes, all right? But that's kind of what it looks like. Now, a lysosome is a membrane-bound organelle found in animal cells that contains enzymes specialized to break down ingested materials, secretions, and waste. These waste and other materials may then be processed and transported out of the cell by the Golgi apparatus. So lysosome is an area that breaks down things. The mitochondria, extremely important for energy. All right, that's what you need to remember. Mitochondria, a lot of people remember it from middle school. They remember the powerhouse of the cell. All right? But more specifically, why is that so? It is because it takes in nutrients and breaks them down to create energy, or ATP, for the cell. The inner membrane of the mitochondria is folded into cristae. The cristae increase the surface of the inner membrane and enhance the mitochondria's ability to produce ATP through the process of cellular respiration. So all these folds on the inside of this mitochondria increase the surface area. Increasing the surface area gives us more space or more room to have more reactions, to produce more ATP. The nuclear membrane is a double lipid bilayer that encloses the genetic material. I'm kind of going to go over the next few on one slide because they're all generally in the same area. The nuclear membrane separates the nucleus of a cell from the cytoplasm and contains pores that allow for the exchange of materials between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Sometimes they're called nuclear pores. They're the holes that are on the outside of the nucleus. The nucleus itself, a lot of times you'll hear it called the brain or the control center of the cell. It contains the nucleolus and the cell's DNA. The nucleolus, a lot of times, is drawn in the center of the nucleus, but it is found within the nucleus of the cell and is responsible for synthesizing or making ribosomes and ribosomal RNA. So if you look up here, this whole area is what we would call the nucleus. This outer darker purple layer is the nuclear membrane, and this inside dark portion is the nucleolus. All right, so there are a lot of different organelles there, all in what we consider to be the nucleus. Ribosomes, RNA and proteins complex that is found in all cells. Now, during translation, ribosomes join amino acids together to form proteins. So ribosomes are extremely important in translation. The vacuole stores water and ingested food in a fluid sac, and plant cells there's a large central vacuole that produces what's known as turgor pressure against the cell wall for support. All right, it kind of presses, or not really presses, but produces enough pressure that it provides support for the cell wall. Now, cells within multicellular organisms are highly specialized. All right, just because you say an organism is alive and it has cells, every cell is different. All right, every cell has its own function. So the type and the number of organelles present can vary. For example, certain plant cells, we talked about plant cells needing chloroplasts for photosynthesis. Certain plant cells don't have chloroplasts. If you think about the roots that are beneath the soil, they don't need chloroplasts, right? Because they don't go through photosynthesis. Plant cells, a lot of times we look at the difference in plant and animal cells. I'm just going to summarize it here in a couple of slides. But plant cells contain some structures that are different from animal cells. Plant cells have chloroplasts, a cell wall, and a large central vacuole. All right, those are different from animal cells. Animal cells do not have those. Now, animal cells also have things that plant cells do not. Animal cells have lysosomes and centrioles, which plant cells do not. All right, there are a lot of things, however, they have in common. So all cells are surrounded by some type of membrane. Plant cells have a cell membrane and a cell wall, while animal cells only have a cell membrane. It's the lack of a cell wall in animal cells that has allowed animals to develop greater diversity of cell types, tissues, and organs. Now, in all types of cells, organisms must interact with one another to fulfill the functions needed to sustain life. All right? So we talked about characteristics of life, but what are some functions that are needed to sustain life? We're going to go through a few of these. One is growth. Cells and multicellular organisms grow as the organism grows. As the cells grow, they have to have new proteins and lipids. Proteins are synthesized by the ribosomes using instructions from the DNA in the nucleus. After proteins are synthesized, they are modified in the rough ER and packaged in the Golgi, which directs them to their destination. Lipids that will be inserted into the cell membrane are synthesized by the smooth ER. So just to grow, there are a lot of processes that the cell has to go through to properly grow and develop. Another function is division. Cells divide so an organism may grow or repair damaged tissue. When we talk about cell division, we mainly focus on two: mitosis, meiosis. Cell division requires the interaction of the centrosome and the cytoskeleton, which work together to ensure that copies of the cell's DNA are correctly divided among two daughter cells. Now, we're not going to go deep into the process of mitosis right now. We will later in a different video. Nutrient acquisition. Cells must acquire nutrients in order to perform life processes. Cells take in nutrients with the help of specialized proteins in the cell membrane. These proteins are produced and inserted into the membrane through a process that involves the ribosomes, the endoplasmic reticulum, and the Golgi apparatus. Once within the cell, nutrients are often transported along the cytoskeleton in vesicles formed by the cell membrane. So cells have to get nutrients to perform certain processes that are essential for the cell to survive and carry out life functions. Cells also have to extract or use some type of energy. They use those nutrients that they acquire to extract energy. Nutrients that enter the cell across the cell membrane may be partially broken down. Then those components are sent on to the mitochondria, where they are further broken down to make ATP. ATP from the mitochondria is sent to all other organelles. ATP is the energy currency in the cell. All right, so it's sent to all organelles in the cell to provide them with energy. Waste disposal. After a cell has acquired and used nutrients for cellular processes, The cell must be able to dispose or get rid of the waste material. Waste can be directly transported across the cell membrane or broken down by lysosomes. And we've already been over the lysosomes, but that's what breaks down the waste. Now, the most important thing I can tell you about cell organelles and remembering their functions and remembering their structure, structure affects function. Say it again, structure affects function. The structure of the organelle enables them to perform their functions. And think about everything we talked about during these examples here. The folded cristae of the mitochondria gives us more surface area for more reactions to make more ATP. The cell membrane has the double lipid bilayer that acts as a selectively permeable layer. It's a waterproof layer. All right? The cell wall in plants. These are all examples of structure affecting the function. Surface area is also extremely important. Many of the reactions that sustain life take place on surfaces inside the cell. Structures that result in a larger surface area increase the number of reactions that can take place on them. All right? So structure affects function, especially when it comes to surface area and chemical reactions. Now, the last set of questions you should be able to answer now for this section, for 1C1. You can go through and answer those. Remember, I'm going to put this at the end of every video because I think it's important. When you're going through and answering these questions, use the testing process that we discussed in class. All right? Read through the question and all the answer choices, marking off one. Go back, highlight the keywords. Use those keywords to mark off another answer choice. That leaves you with 2. Okay? Then you choose the answer that best answers the question. All right? Good luck with those. And in the rest of your packet, I believe you have some things from some genetics review from Ms. Fields. You can watch her videos and she'll show you how to do the genetics problems.